I'm 88 years old, and I never thought I'd be the kind of father telling this story. You spend your whole life building something, a family, a home, a legacy, and you assume that the foundation you've laid is solid enough to hold you when you can't hold yourself anymore. You assume that the love you gave will come back to you when you need it most. You assume that the child you raised, the one you sacrificed everything for, will remember what sacrifice looks like when it's their turn to give it. I was wrong. 6 months ago, my son stood in my living room, the living room I'd worked 3 jobs to pay for, and told me I was too expensive to keep. Those were his exact words, not, "Dad, we need to talk about care options." Not, "This is getting difficult for us." He said, with the kind of casual cruelty that only comes from someone who's already made peace with their decision, that keeping me at home was costing too much and that a nursing home made more financial sense. I'm sitting in that nursing home now, in a room that smells like disinfectant and boiled vegetables, writing this because I need you to understand something. This isn't just my story. This is happening everywhere, to people who built the world their children inherited, and I need to tell you how we got here. Not just how I got to this room with the flickering fluorescent light and the roommate who screams in his sleep, but how we as a society got to the place where a son can look at his father and see a budget line instead of a human being. Let me take you back because the context matters. I grew up poor. The kind of poor where dinner was whatever you could make from nothing, where winter meant choosing between heat and food, where college wasn't even a distant dream because survival was the only goal that mattered. My father worked himself to death at 53, literally. Heart attack on a factory floor, dead before the ambulance arrived, leaving my mother with 4 kids and a mortgage she couldn't pay. I was 16 when he died, and I became the man of the house overnight. I quit school, got a job at the same factory that killed my father, and I worked. God, how I worked. Morning shifts, night shifts, double shifts when they'd let me. I gave my mother every penny except what I needed for the bus to get back and forth. I watched my younger siblings go to school while I went to work, and I told myself it was worth it because someone had to hold the family together. I met Margaret when I was 22. She was a secretary at the factory office, had a smile that made the fluorescent light seem less harsh, and she was the first person in years who made me feel like I was more than just a provider. We got married 6 months later in a ceremony that cost $40 and was perfect anyway. She moved into my mother's house because we couldn't afford our own place yet, and she never once complained. Not when we shared a bedroom with paper-thin walls, not when dinner was rice and beans for the 4th night in a row, not when I came home smelling like metal and exhaustion. We had dreams, Margaret and I. Small dreams, reasonable dreams, a house of our own, maybe 2 kids, a car that didn't break down every other month, the kind of dreams that people who've never been poor think are too small to count as dreams at all. But they were ours, and we worked toward them with everything we had. Our son was born when I was 26. We named him Michael. He was 7 pounds, 3 ounces, and when they put him in my arms for the first time, I made him a promise. I promised him he would never know what I knew. He would never go to bed hungry. He would never wear shoes with holes in them. He would never have to quit school to keep a roof over his head. He would have every opportunity I didn't have, and I would work as many hours as it took to make that happen. I kept that promise. I worked 3 jobs for most of Michael's childhood. Factory job during the day, security guard 3 nights a week, and weekend maintenance at an apartment complex. Margaret worked too, part-time at a grocery store, fitting her hours around Michael's school schedule so one of us was always home with him. We were exhausted all the time, running on coffee and spite and the hope that our son would have a better life than we did. Michael never went without, not once. He had new shoes when he needed them. He had a college fund that we contributed to every single month, even when it meant we ate pasta for a week straight. He had birthday parties and Christmas presents and a bicycle and everything a kid could want. And he was loved. God, he was so loved. Margaret and I might have been tired, but we showed up. Every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game, we were there. He was a good kid. That's what I keep coming back to. He was kind and funny and smart, got decent grades without us having to push too hard, had friends, stayed out of trouble. He went to college on a combination of that fund we'd built and some scholarships, and we were so proud. First person in either of our families to get a degree. We threw him a graduation party that cost more than our wedding, and it was worth every penny to see him walk across that stage. He got a job in finance, made more money in his first year than I'd made in any 5 years of my life. Met a woman named Jennifer, nice enough, came from money, had opinions about things like thread count and wine pairings that I didn't understand but figured were part of the world he belonged to now. They got married, bought a house in a suburb I couldn't afford to visit without feeling out of place. Had 2 kids, Christmas card, family, success story, everything we'd worked for. Margaret got sick when Michael was 32, cancer, ovarian. By the time they caught it, it was already stage 4. We had insurance, but insurance doesn't cover everything, and what it doesn't cover might as well cost $1 million when you've been working class your whole life. I took out a second mortgage on the house. I burned through our retirement savings. I sold everything that wasn't nailed down, and Michael helped. I want to be clear about that. He helped with some of the medical bills, came to some of the appointments, called regularly to check in, but he also said things, little things that didn't seem significant at the time, but that I remember now with perfect clarity. Things about how much it was all costing. About whether we'd considered just keeping her comfortable instead of pursuing aggressive treatment, about quality of life. He never said don't treat her, but he said everything around it, and I pretended not to hear what he was really asking. Margaret died on a Tuesday morning in March with me holding her hand. 42 years of marriage gone. The woman who'd made poverty bearable, who'd raised our son to be better than we were, who'd never once complained about the life we'd built from nothing, was gone. And the house that I'd mortgaged to try to save her was now too big and too full of ghosts and too expensive for me to keep on my own. I thought about selling it. Michael thought I should sell it, but it was the only thing I had left of the life Margaret and I had built, and I couldn't do it, not yet. So I stayed, and I got by. Social Security, a small pension from the factory, some help from Michael here and there. It was tight, but I managed. Then I started falling. First time was in the bathroom, slipped getting out of the shower. Nothing broken, but it scared me. Second time was in the kitchen, don't even know what I tripped on. Third time was at the grocery store, and that one I broke my wrist. The doctor said it was probably a combination of things. Blood pressure medication making me dizzy, arthritis affecting my balance, just being old in a body that didn't work the way it used to. Michael said I couldn't live alone anymore. He was probably right. I was 76, recently widowed, falling with increasing frequency, and living in a 2-story house with stairs that had become a daily challenge. He suggested I move in with him and Jennifer. I said yes because I thought that's what families did. I thought I'd be welcome. I thought wrong. I lasted 3 months in their house, 3 months of being a guest in spaces I couldn't afford, of being too loud when I woke up early because factory jobs train you to wake up early, of taking up room in their lives that they'd apparently allocated to other things. Jennifer never said I wasn't welcome. She just made it clear in 1,000 small ways that I was an inconvenience. The way she'd sigh when I asked where something was. The way she'd make dinner plans without mentioning them until they were leaving. The way she talked about me in third person when I was in the room, as if I were a piece of furniture we were all trying to figure out where to put. Michael, to his credit, tried. But trying looks different when you're trying to keep your wife happy versus trying to take care of your father, and it became clear which one took priority. I don't blame him for choosing his marriage. I raised him to value family. I just didn't realize I wouldn't be included in his definition of family anymore. So when he sat me down after 3 months and said we needed to talk about a more permanent solution, I knew what was coming. He had brochures, actual glossy brochures for nursing homes, the kind with photos of smiling old people in garden settings that looked nothing like the actual facilities. He'd done research, he said, found places that were affordable, that took Medicare, that had decent ratings. He talked about it like he was helping me, like this was a gift he was giving me instead of a problem he was solving. I asked him if there were other options, if I could get in-home care and move back to my house. He said that would cost more. I said I'd pay for it somehow. He said I couldn't afford it, and he'd crunched the numbers to prove it. He had a spreadsheet, my life, my needs, my dignity, all broken down into cells and formulas that apparently added up to me being too expensive to keep. That's when he said it. Looking at his spreadsheet instead of at me, he said, "Dad, the reality is that keeping you at home just doesn't make financial sense. A facility is the most cost-effective option for everyone." Cost-effective. Everyone. I wasn't included in everyone, apparently. I moved into Shady Pines 2 weeks later. That's not really the name, but it might as well be. They're all called something like that. Shady something, sunny something, pleasant something. Names designed to make you think of anything other than what these places actually are, which is warehouses for people whose families have decided they're done. My room is 12 by 14. I share it with a man named Richard who has dementia and thinks I'm his brother. I have a bed, a dresser, a chair, and a window that looks out onto a parking lot. I brought some photos of Margaret, a few books, and my radio. That's what's left of 88 years of life. That's what fits in 12 by 14 feet. The staff here are overworked and underpaid, and most of them are kind when they have the time to be kind, which isn't often. They're managing too many people with too few resources, and it shows. Meals are at set times, and they're all variations on the same soft, bland theme. Because when you're cooking for 100 people with different dietary restrictions and a limited budget, seasoning becomes a luxury. Activities are things like bingo and sing-alongs designed for the lowest common denominator of cognitive function, which means they're mind-numbing if you still have your mind. I still have my mind. That's the worst part. I'm not confused about where I am or why I'm here. I remember everything. I remember working 3 jobs so my son could have new shoes. I remember staying up with him when he was sick, walking him through heartbreak, teaching him to drive, paying for his wedding. I remember all of it with perfect clarity, and I remember him looking at a spreadsheet and deciding I wasn't worth the expense. Michael visits once a month. He brings the grandkids sometimes, and they're uncomfortable the whole time, don't know how to talk to an old man in a place that smells like decay and industrial cleaner. He asks how I'm doing, and I say fine, and we both know it's a lie. He tells me about his job, about the kids' school, about Jennifer's new project, and I nod and ask questions, and we pretend this is normal, that this is what families do. That there's nothing grotesque about a man visiting his father once a month in a facility where he warehoused him because the alternative was inconvenient. I've had a lot of time to think here, too much time. The days are long when you're not actively dying but no longer actively living. And I've come to understand something that I need you to hear, especially if you're younger, especially if you still have your parents, especially if you think this could never be you. This didn't start with the nursing home. It started years ago, so gradually that none of us noticed it happening. It started with the shift from thinking about family as a responsibility you're honored to have, to thinking about family as a burden you're obligated to carry. It started when we began calculating the cost of love instead of simply giving it. It started when we started using phrases like quality of life to mean life that doesn't inconvenience me, instead of life lived with dignity regardless of ability. My son isn't a monster. That's what makes this so insidious. He's a normal person who made a series of normal decisions that all pointed in the direction of his own comfort. He didn't sit down one day and decide to abandon his father. He just decided step by step that his life, his wife's happiness, his children's stability, his financial security, all of those things were more important than his father's dignity. And society told him that was reasonable, that was being responsible, that was being an adult. But here's what no one tells you about putting your parent in a nursing home when they're still cognizant, when they still remember who they are and who you are and what you used to mean to each other. It breaks something, not just in them, in you. My son calls every week like clockwork, Sunday evenings, and I can hear it in his voice. The guilt he's trying to manage, the justification he's rehearsing for himself, the distance he's creating so that this place, this choice doesn't have to touch him too directly. He's spending the rest of my life trying not to think about me. And he'll spend the rest of his life after I'm gone knowing that he made that choice, that when his father needed him most, he chose a spreadsheet. I don't think he understands that yet, but he will. One day his kids will be grown, and they'll have learned from watching him exactly how much their parents are worth when worth is measured in dollars and convenience. And he'll be sitting in a room like this one, wondering how he got here, and the answer will be that he taught them this was acceptable. The other men here, the ones who can still talk coherently, we've formed an accidental support group. We don't call it that. We just sit in the common area in the afternoons and tell each other our stories, how we got here, what we used to do, who we used to be. And the stories are all variations on the same theme. We built things. We worked hard. We raised families. We sacrificed. And our children, our successful, comfortable, modern children, looked at the cost of caring for us and decided we weren't worth it. There's a man here named Frank who was a carpenter, built his daughter's house with his own hands. She visits twice a year. There's a woman named Dorothy who raised 4 kids on her own after her husband died. None of them visit. She calls them sometimes and they're always busy. There's a man named Jim who worked for the post office for 40 years. His son put him here and moved to Arizona. Didn't even leave a forwarding address. We're the generation that built the world our children are living in. We worked the jobs that didn't have benefits. We lived through the times when you couldn't just divorce because things got hard, when you couldn't just quit when work was difficult, when you stuck things out because that's what you did. We raised our children to have choices we never had, and they're using those choices to choose us last. I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying elderly care facilities are inherently bad. Some people need medical care I couldn't provide at home. Some people have conditions that require professional oversight. I understand that. What I'm saying is that I didn't need this. I needed help, yes. I needed someone to check in on me, to help with groceries, to make sure I took my medications, to be there if I fell. I needed family. What I got was an institution. And what I'm saying is that we've built a society where it's not just acceptable but expected that when your parents become inconvenient, you outsource them. We've medicalized and institutionalized aging to the point where we've convinced ourselves that love and care are things you can pay someone else to provide, and that paying for it absolves you of the actual doing of it. Michael pays for this place. He'll be quick to tell you that. He's handling my finances, making sure the bills are paid, doing his duty, and he thinks that's enough. He thinks that because he's paying for someone else to keep me alive, he's fulfilled his obligation as a son. But here's what he doesn't understand, and what I didn't understand until I was sitting in this room. Care isn't a transaction. Love isn't a bill you can pay. Presence isn't something you can outsource. I'm sitting here at 88 years old, and I'm not dying. That's the cruelest part. I'm healthy enough that I could live another 5, maybe 10 years, and I'm going to live them here in this room, with Richard, who thinks I'm his brother, and meals at 5:30 and activities designed for people who can't remember their own names. I'm going to live them knowing that my son has a spare bedroom he uses for storage, that he has a life 15 minutes from here that I'm not part of, that I raised a man who sees me once a month out of obligation and calls it enough. The question I keep coming back to, the one that keeps me up at night staring at the ceiling tiles with the water stains, is how did we get here? Not just me, but all of us. How did we become a society where this is normal, where you can work your entire life, sacrifice everything for your children, and end up alone in a room that smells like disinfectant because you became too expensive? I think it started when we stopped living in multi-generational homes, when we decided that independence meant living separately, that success meant not needing anyone. We created a culture where needing help is seen as failure, where aging is seen as a problem to solve rather than a stage of life to honor. We prioritized individual freedom over collective responsibility, and now we're surprised that when people need collective responsibility, it's nowhere to be found. I think it continued when we started measuring everything in economic terms, when we started talking about people as burdens, as drains on resources, as expensive, when we started doing cost-benefit analyses on our own parents and deciding they didn't pass the test. We've monetized humanity to the point where we've forgotten that some things aren't supposed to have price tags. And I think it crystallized when we lost the script for what family means. We've decided that family is the people you enjoy spending time with, the people who make your life easier, the people who fit neatly into your schedule and your budget. And anyone who doesn't fit that definition, well, there are facilities for that. We pay other people to do the hard parts so we can keep the easy parts, and we call that love. But that's not love. I don't know what it is, but it's not love. Love is showing up when it's inconvenient. Love is sacrifice without spreadsheets. Love is making room in your life for someone even when, especially when, they need more than they can give back. Love is remembering that the person in the nursing home changed your diapers, walked you through nightmares, taught you to read, paid for your education, and loved you when you were the expensive one. I look at my son's life and I understand why he made this choice. I do. He's busy. He's got a demanding job and 2 kids and a marriage that requires attention. He's got a mortgage and college funds to think about and retirement to plan for. He's got a life that doesn't have obvious space for an aging father who falls sometimes and needs help remembering his medications. I understand the logistics that led here. What I don't understand is when we decided that logistics trump humanity, when we decided that being busy is an excuse for not caring, when we decided that our convenience is worth more than our parents' dignity. I'm going to die here. Not tomorrow, probably, but eventually. And when I do, Michael will come to the funeral. He'll cry, probably. He'll give a eulogy about what a good father I was, about the sacrifices I made, about how much he learned from me. And he'll mean it. He'll genuinely believe that he honored me, that he did his best, that the circumstances just didn't allow for anything more. And maybe that's the saddest part, that he'll never understand what he gave up. Not just what he took from me, but what he lost himself. He lost years of knowing me as I am now, not as I was. He lost the conversations we could have had, the wisdom I could have shared, the relationship we could have built in this final stage. He lost the chance to model for his own children what it looks like to honor the people who raised you. He lost the opportunity to be the kind of man I thought I was raising, but more than that, he lost the chance to be human in the fullest sense, to embrace the whole cycle of life, including the parts that are hard and inconvenient and scary, to understand that we're all going to be old one day, if we're lucky, and the world we build for the elderly is the world we're building for ourselves. He's choosing to live in a world where people are disposable when they become expensive, and he doesn't see that he's made himself disposable too. His kids are watching. They're learning. They're seeing that Grandpa lives in a place they visit once a month, that taking care of elderly parents is something you pay other people to do, that love has limits, and those limits are drawn by convenience. And one day, when Michael is 88 and falling and needing help, his kids will have a very clear model for what to do. They'll have brochures ready. They'll have spreadsheets prepared, and they'll tell him it's the most cost-effective option for everyone. If you're reading this and you still have your parents, I need you to hear me. I need you to understand that every choice you make now is teaching someone else what you're worth later. Every time you choose convenience over presence, every time you choose logistics over love, every time you treat your parents like a problem to solve instead of people to cherish, you're writing the script for your own ending. Your parents are not too expensive to keep. They're not a burden you need to outsource. They're the people who made you possible, and they deserve better than a room in a facility where someone paid to care about them does the minimum required to keep them alive. I was never supposed to end up here. I worked too hard. I loved too much. I gave too much. But here I am anyway, because when it came time for my son to decide what I was worth, he calculated it in dollars and decided I cost too much. Don't do that to your parents. Don't do that to yourself. Don't build a world where love has a price tag and people become disposable when they can't pay it. We're better than this. We have to be better than this, because if we're not, then what was any of it for? What was all the work and sacrifice and love for if it ends like this? Alone in a room, too expensive to keep,